Hello, my name is Eva Keitel, and on behalf of CII, I would like to welcome you to our webinar. CII is pleased to partner with InEight to bring you a webinar on how to maximize your project success and profitability through the use of connected analytics. The name of this webinar is Connected Analytics, the next game changer in construction. Before we begin, a few rules for the webinar. Attendees' audio will be muted, but I encourage everyone to post their questions in the question window panel. At the conclusion of the presentation, we will respond to the questions. David Wagner, the VP of Product Marketing at InEight, will serve as the question moderator at the conclusion of the presentation. Leading our webinar today will be Bill Jansen, Field Operation Software Director with Kiewit, and Catie Williams, Product Director with InEight. Without further ado, Bill, please tell us a little bit about yourself and Kiewit.
All right, thank you, Eva, and good morning, everyone, and thank you for the introduction. I think Eva did a pretty good job of giving you my background, so I'll talk a little bit about the company I work for, Kiewit. Kiewit is a construction and engineering company based out of Omaha, Nebraska. We do work all over North America and a little bit overseas, and that work adds up to between $8 and $9 billion in annual revenue, and currently puts us in the 5th position on the ENR Top 400 contractor list. We've been in business for almost 135 years and are fairly diverse in the markets we serve. Now, as you can see on the slide, our top 3 industries are transportation, power, and oil, gas, and chemical. But we also do a good amount of work in the vertical building, water and wastewater, and mining areas. I'll now turn it over to my co-presenter, Catie Williams, to tell you a little bit about InEight.
Thanks, Bill. InEight is a project management software providing solutions from design to estimate and field execution to turnover. With over 25 years experience in construction technology, our real-time insights give you the visibility you need to manage your projects. Our goal is to drive efficiency and certainty in capital project delivery. InEight currently has over 650 employees with over 750 customers in 33 countries. Thank you, Eva, for the introductions and CII for having us on this webinar. I would also like to thank everyone on the phone for joining us here today. I'm excited and grateful for the opportunity to be here to talk about some problems that many of you are aware have been impacting our industry for the last 2 decades, and how connected analytics can make a difference. Data and analytics are topics I am personally very passionate about, and I look forward to sharing how we think connected analytics can be a game changer for you. McKinsey & Company did a study in 2017 that found construction ranks at the bottom as an industry when it comes to digitization. Even more alarming are the facts they found about capital projects. 98% of projects are experiencing cost or schedule overruns, which leads to being on average 80% over budget and projects being completed 20 months or more behind schedule. While once viewed a leader in innovation, construction now finds itself at the back of the pack and struggling to keep up with other industries, which is having a huge impact on productivity and profitability. In fact, construction has had the lowest productivity gains of any industry in the last 20 years. McKinsey's study estimates that for every 25% loss in productivity, there is a loss of approximately 1% in margin. And where margins are tight enough already to win the project, productivity losses cannot continue to grow. So why are there so many productivity issues in construction? Well, there are the obvious regional differences, the type of work, and the way the work is executed that make construction so different than other industries. Another key reason is the perceived customized nature of the work, with no 2 projects being exactly the same, from the differences in our owner and contract requirements to the actual execution, which requires projects to start from scratch each time. There also isn't a consistent cost coding system that can be used across companies, verticals, or countries, which causes a loss of information between projects. And while we know productivity is a problem in construction, this problem isn't equal across the industry. Certain areas are seeing better productivity than others. And when McKinsey started researching why these differences within the industry exist, they found most projects could be lumped into 2 groups: so heavy construction such as civil and industrial work, and then large-scale housing, or the fragmented specialized trades such as mechanical, electrical, and plumbing that typically act as subcontractors or work on smaller projects like family housing. What McKinsey found in their analysis of productivity is that heavy construction, such as civil and industrial work, tend to have 20 to 40% higher productivity than the second. In America, less than 5% of builders work for construction firms that employ over 10,000 workers, compared with 23% in business services and 25% in manufacturing. To further drive home this point, America in 2017 had 730,000 building companies, with an average of only 10 employees. These smaller building companies drive the need for more subcontracting on projects, which does have a direct impact on margin and cost, but it also has an impact on productivity because it limits the technology tools that could be used on a project and the information that could be shared between owners, vendors, contractors, and subs. It also means workers are constantly learning new systems or processes. An organization with 10,000 workers or more is likely trying to have everyone use the same streamlined system, for example, the same cost coding system. But when you're introducing multiple companies, the need for overhead on managing those companies and having multiple systems leads to the loss of project visibility and adds to the disconnectedness in our industry. This contributes to the fact that construction has the lowest profit margins of any industry except for retail. A study done in 2014 by Box called The Information Economy, a study of 5 industries, further supports this disconnection our industry is currently experiencing. While some of this fragmentation is due to the physical nature and custom requirements of our work, as an industry, we are not sharing with our internal staff or our external subs, architects, owners in an efficient way that maximizes productivity on the job. Depicted here are several social network diagrams that display nodes representing those internal and external connections of information flowing. The red in a diagram indicates an internal communication, the blue an external. And I'm going to pause for just a moment so you can look at all the industries. And remember, the blue is an external and the red is an internal communication. So while you can see in construction there is a lot more blue than the other industries, there is very little red. This collaboration gap several other industries have started to bridge by introducing technology and more integrated systems. And while the spend in technology in construction is increasing, what is still missing is that entire life cycle visibility. What one owner requires might mean no longer using that company system, which means the internal team no longer has up-to-date information, and now that project data exists in a vacuum that can't be reused. The data collected in this study showed construction firms interact with outside parties 2 times more than the included industries, which is indicated by how wide this diagram is. But as you can see from the lack of red in the diagram, our internal communication and collaboration is very weak. If we compare our industry to the other industries shown, there are some similarities. The software, media, and entertainment industries also have a significant number of external connections occurring, but their internal communications are much more active. It begs the question, how is the lack of a bridge between internal and external communication impacting our project profitability? What information isn't being shared and disseminated that is affecting our bottom lines? And if we extrapolate this to all our resources, our people, materials, and systems, it becomes clear there is not enough collaboration and integration happening in our industry. So how does this lack of being connected impact you? Without this visibility, it is impossible to know how your projects are truly performing. Not having a cohesive picture of all the risks and issues leads to projects being over budget, and as we heard from McKinsey, being delivered way behind schedule. Is your schedule integrated with your operations, or does it stand alone as its own separate system? Do you frequently have to manipulate data inside spreadsheets to prepare for monthly reporting? Are your employees sandbagging their monthly reports until the end of the year, so you have no idea how your projects are really doing? Can you rely on the data in your reports, or do you find yourself cross-checking in Excel? If you had all the information in one view, you could identify areas that could start to become predictors of project failure, like productivity issues or safety and quality issues. Do you know how your operations compare to other projects? Do you have the information to determine if you are just beating your estimate, or are you actually beating your budget? Without understanding the scope of your project, change orders and issues become out of hand, which ultimately impacts your relationships with the client and future opportunities. This visibility is vital to maintaining and growing your backlog. Retaining employees that are data savvy will also become a challenge without creating a culture of data-driven decisions versus gut and experience. All of these items are impacts of not having connected, leveraged data. Phil is now going to walk through some of the challenges Kiewit was facing from not having connected systems and how Kiewit has made some strides to tackle these issues.
All right, thanks, Katie. So let me start by telling you all a story. Just under 10 years ago, our CEO, Bruce Grucock, visited a large billion-dollar infrastructure project on the West Coast. As part of his visit, he talked with the project manager about the project's cost versus budget performance, and the project manager proudly pulled out a 1,500-page cost report. He started going through some of the project's major operations in detail. Now, whether it was an epiphany or simply frustration with the way we were operating, Bruce decided then and there that we had to find a better way to manage our work as a company. Now, up until this point, we had been quite successful for decades as a company, so why change anything? Well, quite frankly, our projects were getting bigger and more complex, but the tools we used to manage them hadn't changed much. They mostly consisted of paper, spreadsheets, and a few largely disconnected homegrown software systems. To stay relevant in the future, we needed an enterprise-level, fully integrated system so information could be shared across the entire organization and we could begin to become a data-driven company. So in 2010, we embarked on our technology revolution. We began implementation of an ERP system and several complementary field-facing solutions that included a new estimating system, a quantity management system, a mobile planning and time collection system, among others. Now, I won't lie and tell you that it was an easy transition. The ERP system we chose was very powerful, but extremely complicated. At the time, many of the field-facing software solutions we chose didn't exist commercially, so we had to build them ourselves and then integrate them back to the ERP system. We did select commercial estimating and cost management systems, but at the time, interfaces back to the ERP system didn't exist, so we had to develop those too, which was a very large undertaking. So to sum it up, it took over 4 years to select, build, configure, deploy, and train our employees on the new connected solutions. However, shortly after the system was rolled out, the benefits became apparent. Standard tools replaced spreadsheets, mobile devices replaced paper time cards, and data was truly visible across the company for the first time. However, we were still left with several challenges. Our new tools had a very steep learning curve, which was partly because of the complexity and partly because our field engineers and managers had inconsistent user experiences between applications. In other cases, we forced people in the field to change their business process to match whatever the software could do instead of adapting the software to whatever our business processes were. And last, we knew that at the time, our overall solution, since largely custom, would become quickly obsolete. So in 2015, we purchased the company that was then called Hard Dollar and shortly after renamed InEight. We turned our field-facing solutions over to them along with our intellectual property and a few of our key resources. And then InEight embarked on greatly improving those products while at the same time turning them into commercial software. We began using the products they rebuilt for us about 1.5 years ago, and the feedback has been very positive. Users have streamlined workflows, simplified interfaces, and a consistent user experience between products. Now, these are certainly important to me as Kiewit's Field Product Director, but what's most important to me is that we now have a truly sustainable set of tools for our field to use. Tools that will not only stay current technically, but be best in the industry long-term and evolve with not only our input, but input from the entire industry. So now I want to switch gears a little and spend a few minutes talking about a few of the things we misjudged early on. When we set out on our technology overhaul, we were somewhat delusional about what real-time meant from a business standpoint. At the time, we thought that there would be no need for a month-end process or even weekly labor productivity reporting. We thought that since we were building a system that had real-time integration, data would always be current and accurate. That was flat out wrong. While things like cost and labor data are available real-time, we still needed to true up the offsetting quantities on a regular basis in order to measure our cost versus budget and productivity. It's not like our foremen or engineers would be in the system claiming quantities the minute cost hit the system or we expended man hours. In a lot of ways, we still true up both labor and non-labor quantities on the same frequency we always have. As an example, once a week, we make sure every project has updated quantities associated with their labor items, so we can calculate productivity across the entire organization. And then monthly, we check on the non-labor items as well. So that frequency hasn't changed much with our new system. So what has? Well, I'll give you 3 examples. The first is the process of doing things within the system is flat out much easier. The tools enable a much faster and more accurate way of ensuring that data is correct. The second thing is, as part of our technology overhaul, we introduced a company-wide cost coding structure that was built into the software. This was a huge and very important change for us because those codes serve as the key identifiers to calculate productivity and cost across our entire company. We can now challenge our projects to not only beat their budget, but try to achieve the best cost ever for projects of a similar nature. And the last thing I'll mention is that while it's true that large billion-dollar projects can and do have cost reports that are still several hundred pages in length, those reports are no longer used to drive behavior and make decisions on the job. We rather focus on exception reporting. And Catie's going to show you a few examples of what exception reporting looks like. But in short, I'll tell you that for our company, it allows us to focus on items that we still have an opportunity to change to the benefit of the project.
So Bill talked about how Kiewit was facing these challenges, and by implementing an integrated and connected system, it helped them improve their operations. So how can we as an industry start to tackle this problem? One place to start is with the end in mind and determine what you want to measure before you even begin putting a process in place. Technology is only one part of the solution. The real work is in understanding what you want from a system and the information you need to run your business. This is easier said than done, so another alternative is to take your existing reports and metrics and do a gap analysis of what you believe is missing, and then go back to your applications to determine if you have all the necessary data to even produce those metrics that you want. Focus on one subject area at a time versus trying to tackle everything at once. Once you demonstrate results from one KPI, it becomes much easier to gain buy-in and handle change management. It is also a good idea to conduct an analysis of the data that is currently being collected to determine if it is even adding value, because you may be spending overhead collecting data that isn't driving any decisions, which you definitely don't want to do. The quality of the data is another big concern to improve the output and ensure you can actually have connected data and analytics. Sometimes your employees don't understand what the data they enter drives from a decision perspective, so bringing visibility to this is important if you want good data. Otherwise, that saying garbage in, garbage out really is true, and that is what you will get in your systems. A way to tackle this is sometimes helpful by taking a top-down approach, which drives clarity around what decisions the data being entered actually drives. Getting all your users in the same system and following the same processes will help enable quality data and provide better visibility. But there are still some ways to bring disparate systems together. There are various reporting tools available that will let you blend data together so you can still get the metrics you need to measure your projects without requiring the expense of a fully integrated project management system or an ERP like Bill mentioned. This may be more of a manual work, but it is definitely a step in the right direction. And finally, working to standardize your data, for example, with standard cost codes, so that you can use it to track past project performance, improve your estimates, compare other projects against each other, and know whether or not you should even bid on a project should also be a focus. This is another effort that is extremely challenging, but will pay dividends if you can start to gain momentum doing it within your organization. This is an initiative that can start as a small effort with just a couple projects, and then by leveraging an executive level sponsor will help push it to the entire organization once they see the output. If we look at this sample chart, it can be pretty impactful to show 5 comparable projects during a manager's meeting with their productivity factors on the screen, or maybe their labor efficiency index right next to each other. These type of visuals will definitely help drive the right behaviors. Once you start standardizing your processes and data, being able to leverage your data for predictions to impact your future outcomes becomes more possible. Portfolio level dashboards are an example of an output that will help provide you visibility to all your projects and save you time from having to run individual reports or hunt down people to get the information and find the answers you are looking for. Even if your data is in different systems or spreadsheets, a portfolio level dashboard is possible through tools like Power BI that give you the ability to do data blending with various sources. A recent study from KPMG indicated that 78% of engineering and construction companies believe project risks are increasing, and of that number, 60% are seeing rising project volumes, making it harder to manage the complexity and scope of their projects. Bring visibility to project risks by using dashboards that aggregate all your projects in one view, like the example shown. As you can see from the chord chart in the middle of this dashboard, where I have projects on the left and issues on the right, my DOT project has the most issues, and overall I am struggling with change orders and third-party issues. So if I select that DOT roadwork project, I can see that not only are change orders and issues, but I am also forecasting to lose money, even with that approved change order amount being added to my budget. Views like this give me the ability to quickly see where I need to focus and then drill into more detail in other tabs. A lot of systems will also let me create notifications or alerts if certain metrics reach a threshold I have set, informing me of an issue, or hopefully even being proactive enough to inform me of a potential issue. And maybe these metrics aren't the ones that are the most important to your organization either. What is most important is consolidating the information in one place so your team doesn't have to go hunting around to find it and wasting time manually pulling this information together. Another tool available for measuring project status is earned value management. However, in that same reference study I previously mentioned, 41% of respondents indicated they aren't using it at all. Earned value management is one of the only industry recognized and consistent methods for measuring cost and schedule performance, and it helps bridge the gap between owners and contractors to get you on the same page in terms of project delivery. As you can see based on this visual, earned value management provides the budgeted man-hours planned for the work, the earned value, which is your man-hours for the work that was actually completed, and what the actual man-hours to date are. When we look at this chart, I can quickly see I am behind schedule, but I am earning more man-hours than I am spending. You could do the same with cost. On this chart, if we drill in, I can see I'm doing really well very quickly, and it is still pretty early on this project, but I can really quickly see I am ahead of schedule and I am beating my budget. This type of information can take some organizations months to manually pull together, but with an integrated project management system and schedule, you can quickly get a pulse on how your projects are doing, and it helps me communicate with external stakeholders better. Changes in scope have a significant impact on projects, and tracking the status, schedule, resource, and material impacts can be challenging. It's estimated by the Independent Project Analysis Group that on average, over 35% of all construction projects will have a major change. Providing this information in easy to navigate views across all projects gives the information your staff needs to understand the impacts of such changes and where their biggest issues are. This information is also rich with insights to help you predict where you might have issues on future projects. And even if this data is just being tracked in a spreadsheet or Excel, understanding changes and issues and highlighting which projects have the biggest risk gives the opportunity to make adjustments on a project before it is too late. The ability to see the status of RFIs and how many days outstanding for the responses is critical in understanding how your project's risk, and something that frequently leads to project delays. 82% of owners feel they need more collaboration with their contractors, and providing visibility to this data helps communicate where there are gaps and a need for more information from each other. And in this final example, I want to walk through how productivity data would traditionally be looked at and how modifying visualizations and the way data is presented can help enable your projects to make decisions faster and understand where they have issues more clearly. This is a typical productivity report, and the data may be grouped by a cost code, or maybe it's all blown out in detail for a project. It's usually very tabular in nature, so when I say that, I mean it's Excel-like, where it's laid out in columns and rows. The productivity factor on this report is circled, and when I say that, I mean earned man-hours over actual man-hours. And we could have added color to maybe make it stand out a little bit more. But in general, if I were looking for productivity issues or areas where productivity is doing really well, I would have to go line by line based on the report grouping to find areas where I am above or below a 1. But if we look at another example of how productivity data could be looked at, it might be in this bar chart, which I have also circled. In this chart, you can see the cost codes on the bottom and the productivity factor on the bars. I have arrows pointing to the 2 codes that are currently performing the best, removals and building. They are both well above a 1, which anything above a 1 is great for your productivity factor. However, if we look at that tree map on the right and try to find removals and building, we can see right away that they aren't there. So what are we looking at in this tree map? Well, each box is broken down by the highest level of the cost code hierarchy. The size of the box is driven by the current budget man-hours. That white line is the percent complete. So if we look at the left side of the white line, it's the completed man-hours. The hours to the right of the white line are the remaining. And then the color of the box is driven by the productivity factor. So the more red it is, the worse, and the more green, the better. So if we go back to those 2 codes that had the great productivity factors, according to the bar chart, building and removal, I find building, it has 335 man-hours, and then there's removals with 249 man-hours. They are the really small boxes that are green. And it is great that they both did well from a productivity perspective, but they really didn't make up that many man-hours on the job. So from a scale perspective, the bar chart is a bit misleading. The bar chart also doesn't provide percent complete, and we could put a period filter on the bar chart to remove the codes that don't apply in that period, but we would still miss the scale it has on the overall job. What we really want to focus on are the largest boxes that are the most red and that aren't too far along, so we can still make a difference on those remaining man-hours. You can do this without hovering over each box, but I have provided the tooltip from each box so we can see. So mechanical equipment's at 86% complete, piping and insulation 72, and electrical instrumentation 66. At any point, I could click on one of these cost codes and see its 3-month trend to find out if it has been getting better or if it has been getting worse, and determine if that is the code I should focus on. So I can see electrical has been getting better, and piping and insulation, though it has been getting better, it did have a more recent trend down. This gives me a starting point to figure out where I should start drilling through my cost code hierarchy and find out which crew I need to contact and which operation might need to have a change made to. If I'm getting this data on a regular basis, I should be able to make frequent changes and improvements to my productivity to hopefully keep my project on track. Doing this kind of analysis would only take a couple minutes, and I could easily come up with a few areas that need attention that have the largest area of opportunity, which is why I need percent complete and man-hours added to the visualization. Because I have standard cost codes, I can also compare this data to other projects to understand how the codes within mechanical equipment typically do, or use it to help me in an estimate. So if I go back to this report, the original traditional report, think of how long it would have taken me to come up with that same answer, or if I would have even found it at all. To consider percent complete in man-hours would have required me looking at 2 other columns simultaneously versus using a visual that did that work for me and gave me the information much quicker. This is just one example available where a visualization can replace traditional ways of looking at and consuming information. Users need to be enabled to create custom reports and visualizations to discover hidden insights and should use data to support and drive their decision-making, similar to this productivity example we just walked through. Validate experience and gut-based decisions with reports and metrics that support them, and encourage your employees to speak up when the data supports doing something a different way. All you have to do is start with one metric, and as you can see from this productivity factor example, look how far it can take you to providing information that will help drive better, more timely decisions on your jobs and future work. And it doesn't have to be the productivity factor. It could have been LEI or the labor efficiency index. All it takes is starting with one metric to bring more visibility and connect your data. It is estimated that the construction industry could boost its value by an added $1.6 trillion, which would add about 2% to the global economy, with a third of that opportunity being in the United States if productivity improvements are found. There is about $1 trillion annually spent on infrastructure in the world, but most of those projects come in late and over budget. Imagine having visibility to the design, the owner requirements, your schedule, subcontractor hours and costs, scope changes, documents, all in one place versus manually collecting the information, or worse, not having some of it at all. If we could build more for less, we could meet about half of the world's infrastructure need. So the real question is, when are we going to stop leaving all of this on the table? Thank you everyone for your time. Thank you CII and Bill. And now Dave is going to run through some questions that were submitted through the presentation.
Thanks, Bill and Catie, that was great. So again, as Ava mentioned earlier, I would encourage everyone, if they have some questions, to type them into the question box as part of the GoToWebinar panel. So, Bill, there's a question. How did Kiewit get their organization to adopt a standard cost code system? What suggestions do you have for those wanting to embark on the same initiative?
Well, that's a good question. So we first rolled it out, I guess it's 6 years ago already, and it's mostly adopted through our company, but I would say we're still in the process of getting a few of the laggard districts to adopt it. For certain industries, power, oil, gas, and chemical, some of the more commodity-driven industries, it was fairly easy from adoption standpoint. It was a lot tougher on infrastructure districts, particularly some of the infrastructure districts within our company that had a version of kind of a district-specific coding system prior to the rollout. And if that district-specific coding system didn't align with the new coding system, they pushed back. You know, honestly, in order to make it successful, or the biggest driver was executive top-down support, and you know, getting people, expecting people to use it, that was a big driver. And then for the districts that did adopt it early, the power and oil, gas, and chemical districts, you know, kind of showcasing the cool things that they were doing as a result of adopting the codes went a long ways in getting some of the other districts to get closer to being on board.
Thanks, Bill. A follow-up, how long did it take before Kiewit saw significant benefits?
You know, from a standard coding perspective, I would say some of the, again, in power, oil, gas, and chemical, some of the more early adopters, I would say it took a couple years. And the way we got those benefits, those districts went back to a number of their historic projects that they had good data on, and you know, got that data to fit the new standard coding structure. So then they had data to compare against. And then they had all of their new estimates and new projects that were being set up. They applied the new cost coding system to it, and then they were able to compare, again, some of the things I talked about. They were able to compare the estimates to those historic projects, or some of the ongoing projects to those historic projects as well, from an analysis perspective. So in general terms, I'd say 2 years, maybe. We had pockets that were a little bit earlier than that, but it took a while. We're a pretty big company, and it takes a while to get people to adopt things like that.
So Bill, do you have any lessons you've learned on how people could decrease that time to their advantage?
Well, yes. I thought about it before for other calls and other discussions. Our current coding system is around 17,000 codes, which in my opinion is, boy, at least 10,000 codes too many. We got a little bit carried away early on with the granularity of our coding system. If we would have kept it at a higher level, I think that would have helped, and then, added detail where we needed to as time went on. So I think keeping it at a bit higher level would help. And again, depending on what industries you work in, if you just do work in vertical building, there are obviously a number of industry coding structures out there already that are pretty good. Matter of fact, our vertical building district within Kiewit, they do use our standard coding structure, but they also use the uniformat coding structure as well, so they can, kind of tie it back to what's, I would say is the more official industry coding structure for that. So, yeah, a couple ideas there.
So, Bill, did you face any objections or physical obstructions from the employees? And if so, how did you overcome those?
Well, yeah, I mean, so maybe I'll give you a little bit more background on Kiewit. So we have roughly 34 operating districts. We had, I would say, 5 to 6 districts that, maybe they said that they would use account codes or they would use our cost coding structure, but, that they would say it, and if you looked at any of their data, they just weren't doing it. I don't know that they physically obstructed other districts from using the cost coding structure, but they just basically flat out refused to do it. And it went on like that for 3 years. And honestly, until we started seeing benefits from some of the districts that did adopt it, and quite frankly, those were very successful districts financially within our company. And, they attribute some of that to the use of cost codes. It can't all be attributed to that. But because of that, executive leadership and executive oversight over those districts started, forcing them or setting the expectation that they would use it, and, asking them to prove to them that they were using it. And again, since then, over the last 3 years, they really have come around. There's still pockets that they don't align the best. The codes don't align to the type of work we do the best. And there's still a few small pockets like that, but I would say we are 95% of the way there as a company.
So, Catie, do you have any suggestions for companies that don't currently have integrated systems?
Sure. I think I kind of talked a little bit about it in the presentation, but an option is definitely some of the modern reporting tools that are available. So like your Power BIs, your Tableaus, they definitely provide a capability to blend data together. And it's definitely harder than I'm making it sound, but as long as you have like a key that you can tie data together, so like project number between 2 systems, these tools make it possible to bring various sources together and then produce reporting together. But what usually becomes challenging is the granularity of the data. So if the data isn't all at the same level and it's aggregated at different levels, that's where it usually becomes more challenging. But if you do have a way of connecting 2 systems manually, so if you have project number in one system and project number in another system, those tools do give you the power of bringing them together so that you could at least automate some of your reporting. But data quality is something that usually becomes a challenge, and maybe is something that you can fix in a system even if you can't create an automated integration between 2 separate systems that you have.
Thanks, Catie. So I'm going to throw this one out to both of you. How do you guys keep employees from keeping those side spreadsheets? How do you know the employees won't find another method of sandbagging, even with all the new updated technology?
So I'll take I was going to say I can take a crack at that first. They will, at least initially. When we rolled out our system, kind of our newer system, 4 or 5 years ago, there are a lot of people that they just didn't trust that the data within the system would be accurate. They didn't trust that they'd be able to keep running their work with the new system. So they did keep side spreadsheets. I would say, again, in my opinion, what I saw, the biggest way to drive that out was just to make the whatever system you go to, the standard system, successful, easy to use. And then from a, kind of a management level or an executive leadership level, set the expectation that the reports or whatever data you're getting out of the system, that's what you want to look at, to review when you go to the projects, not something kept on the side. So between those two things, and like I said, initially, some of it, I mean, we're a company of engineers and everybody wants the numbers to add up down to the penny. So they, again, just from a trust standpoint, they wanted to make sure that the data reflected in the overall system matched what they thought it should be. And as they verified one or two times, they somewhat abandoned those side spreadsheets.
I think the only thing I'd add is that those are great people to engage in your initiative because they usually are pretty detail oriented and can help be good validators of what you're doing. And then let things run in parallel. So, I mean, let them have their solution and then you have your report or system or whatever it is that they're validating in the side spreadsheets until they get comfortable and trust the system that you're using.
So, Bill, how did you get the contractors on board with this change?
Well, what do you mean by contractors, or who? I don't know if they wrote a little bit more in that question. Just the folks within our company. So the contractors within our company, or?
Yes, that's what he's referring to.
Okay. Well, I mean, it was huge change management. I mean, it was the biggest technology change, and I'm referring to the initial rollout of our tools in the 2013 timeframe. It was the biggest technology change that our company had ever seen, and quite frankly, will probably ever seen all at once. So change management was huge, and it was difficult. We came at it through multiple avenues. There were a lot of, trainings conducted at the district and project offices. There was a big PR campaign. There were executive training sessions to get kind of our executive leadership to understand the tools, maybe not know how to operate the new tools and things like that, but they would at least have the awareness of what we were doing so that they could, again, kind of set the expectation in the field. And then a lot of support. I mean, it was between the ERP system, the field-facing tools, some new reports, and a whole bunch of other changes coupled to that. It took a while. I mean, to be honest, I mean, it was probably at least a year for our company to kind of get over that learning curve. Now, I talked a little bit when I was going through my presentation earlier. Part of that was because we had introduced probably a dozen different software tools at the time, and they all had a different way of using them. Our ERP system is a big one, and it's very complicated to use. So that all added to that learning curve, but I would say it took at least a year for us to really kind of get over that learning curve and get back to where we were as a company in terms of efficiency. But then since then, it's greatly improved. So there are, again, just from my opinion, there are no silver bullets to make that change effective. You just come at it from multiple angles.
So, Bill, with all the data you're now collecting internally, are you also incorporating external data, things like weather, economic trends, et cetera, to help you predict future performance? If so, what challenges have you faced?
I'm probably not 100% qualified to answer that question. So the answer to the question is yes, we are doing that. We have a small team of data. They're data scientists. It's a group, I think, of 5 individuals now, and they certainly do look at external sources of information for their models that they produce to check forecasts on a job. One of the models that they've produced is called Project Watchdog, and it is a report that is run on every project over $10 million in value every month. And the intent of the report, and it's quite effective, is to predict potentially jobs that would lose money financially or lose significant money from a budgetary standpoint well before their cost report or anything indicates that they are. So it looks at, I believe, 41 different factors. Most of those are internal, but there are some external data points that they use as well. Another report that group created is called the Probability of Success Index. We run that against estimates just before we really even start estimating. So we in theory pick jobs to estimate that we have a higher chance of winning. And that it has been pretty effective as well. And I do know for a fact that they do look at external data sources in that model as well. Now, I can't tell you exactly what it is, but I do know we do look at a little bit of that.
So Catie, we have someone representing the owner on a project. How can they integrate the contractor and their end user into a single system?
So, like, do you mean how could they see the data for everyone? Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm assuming, yes.
So I think if I'm talking about InEight specifically, I think that would be possible if that's what you mean. But otherwise, I mean, I think what a contractor could do if they were not using a consolidated system, they would probably have to do the same thing with like a reporting tool and have to do some data transformations to get the data to work and blend together. That would be a lot more challenging because there aren't standards. Like I mentioned, that's something InEight is helping to provide as a solution, is the ability for an owner to have multiple contractors use their system so that they can get that portfolio view as an owner. But again, if you weren't using something integrated, you would have to do quite a bit of work to the data to be able to bring it in and provide consolidated reporting. Not that it couldn't be done, but for example, I mean, your project numbers and things like that, the format of them probably isn't going to be the same. So there would definitely have to be work done to the data so that you could bring it together and blend it together. But again, not that it couldn't be done, it just would probably require transforming the data in order to make that work. Hopefully that answered the question adequately. If not, I can try to keep going.
So Bill, is this a third-party visualization system, or does Kiewit employ data scientists to create their visualizations?
No, we employ our own. Initially, they were hired on. We hired a couple as contractors through a third-party company. Again, they don't work within my department. I think they were initially hired on 5-6 years ago. And then those two, what at the time were contractors, came on as Kiewit employees, and since the team has grown slightly. Like I said, I think there's 5 or 6 total that work in that department now.
Great. Are you planning on leveraging advanced predictive analytics and machine learning in the future, and if so, how?
So yes, absolutely. How? That's a great question, and I don't have all the answers for that. I can give you a couple ideas of areas that I'd like to explore. So before I begin to answer that, I'd say honestly, I think we're probably 2 to 3 years away as a company from seeing it a bit more widespread. We have partnered with Microsoft. It's nothing on the cost control side yet, but we have partnered with Microsoft on one of our mines, and they have built a predictive or a machine learning model to predict failure of our heavy haul mine trucks, just because we have a ton of historic data on those mine trucks. So it's been pretty cool. They have put it in practice, and we, as a result, are doing preventative maintenance, not just based off of a schedule or based on hours, but based on what that model is telling us. So we are using that within our company already. I would say we're 2 to 3 years away from really using it on kind of the cost control side of the house or the estimating side of the house. I talked a little bit about that cost coding structure that we use. We use it heavily on the estimating side of the house for benchmarking. We compare estimates to active projects. There's a real potential there. Right now, we currently, as estimators or just people, choose the right comparable jobs or the right comparable jobs for a specific discipline. It isn't too far away to let the computer pick jobs or let machines pick jobs that they think are comparable. And then people, of course, would have to say, no, that's really not comparable, or yes, it is. And then we train the algorithm and it gets better over time. And I don't know that initially it will replace what people do, but I think it will help give people a new perspective on things and pick better jobs, as an example. Likewise, you know, from a construction standpoint on the project execution side of the house, we generate a tremendous amount of data as a company every day: pictures, photos, videos, operation reports, work plans. And we are sharing that across the company now through our cost coding structure, but just training algorithms to identify like projects to the one you're building and find effective ways that they built something on that project, and then getting that to the project team that has yet to build that will be a huge application of that machine learning.
Great. So we have a big fan of earned value management on the phone. Can you guys kindly explain the difference between it and benefits realization management?
Boy, Catie, I'll take, well, I'll say I probably can't answer that. I'm not familiar with what benefits realization management is.
I am not either, so I definitely don't want to misspeak about what it is. Sounds like a good one for me to learn about, though.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't answer that either.
Okay, not a problem. We have had a couple questions specifically about InEight. I'll take the first one. As was mentioned earlier, InEight is owned by Kiewit, but we do sell our solutions to other contractors and owners in the AEC space. And then Catie, a couple for you. Can you talk a little bit about our ability to import information for the contractor in through InEight? And also, what type of technology does InEight use for its reporting and insights?
Sure. So InEight offers various products that provide a project management solution. So if you're not using those tools, we do have a data model that could be used for reporting as well. So there would be a mechanism to bring your data in from a different tool. So there is like a mapping exercise that would have to happen, right, to put your data into like a project control system or for estimating, for example, if that makes sense, so that you could leverage the reports and dashboards and the data model that we've built. From a technology perspective of what we're using, Power BI is what we're using for the dashboards. And then we do have standard reports as well, and we use SSRS for those.
Thanks, Catie. Well, that looks like all the questions that we have. Does anybody have any final questions? Does not appear so. So I, on behalf of CII and InEight, I want to thank everyone for attending, and enjoy the rest of your day. Yep, if you have any additional